Hey Girk, this is JD. I'm responding to your video you made on the feasts and why we should follow them, parts 1 and 2. Um, Before I get into it, I would like to say this much. Everything that I say on here is, as far as I know, is as best and sincere as I mean to say it. So, I guess, because later on, towards the end of this presentation, you're not going to like what I have to say, but I feel that it needs to be said. So I gotta say it. Anyway, here goes. In your presentation about following the feasts, you stated, on the one hand, you said we're to follow all, or we don't need to follow the 613 mitzvahs, or however many there were. Then, a few minutes later, you say, yeah, if we want to obey God, we need to follow them all. You do this like at least 5 different times. You keep going back here, to over here, to over here. So, assuming that you believe that in order to obey God, you have to follow every single law that God ever instituted. What about this one? On the Sabbath day, or on the 2 days that are supposed to be holy unto the Lord, you're not to leave your house. You're not to do anything on that day. How do you reconcile this, Girk? You can't really, because we all get up and go to church, or we get up and read our Bibles in the morning on Sunday or Saturday or whenever we get together. How can you reconcile this passage, Girk? This is part of God's laws. And therefore, by your own definition, you're not following the law. You're breaking it. What about that time the guy went outside on the Sabbath to pick up sticks? He got stoned to death because he wasn't supposed to do any manual labor or any kind of work. Don't tell me you don't do anything at all on the Sabbath. I know you do. And you know you do. So, as it stands, you're a lawbreaker. By the strict definition that you've given of following all 613 mitzvahs, you're guilty. Hands down. There are several different things I want to address. Here's the second thing I want to address. In Exodus chapter 12:27, it says, "Then you will say, it is the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt, whom he smote, the Egyptians, and delivered our houses, and the people bowed their heads in worship." In that previous verse it says, "And it shall come to pass when your children will say unto you, what do you mean by this ritual? And then you'll say, to sacrifice the Lord Passover," so on and so forth. This feast was a memorial. It commemorated the time when God led Israel out of Egypt. A memorial. Okay? Now, of course, Passovers also, the Jews used it for, as far as I know, and as I'm aware of, it was a sacrifice. So when they did these memorials, they weren't just doing some nice little symbolic ceremony. It was a sacrifice. At least, now this is as far as Passover is concerned. I'm not really sure about the other feasts, but this much I know about Passover, is that it not only was a religious festival of sorts, but it was a sacrifice. "And this day shall be unto you for a memorial." What day? The day that they put the stuff on the blood on the posts. You will keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. You will keep it a feast by ordinance forever. Chukath olam. An everlasting or endless statute. Now I'm reading from Clark's commentary here. It goes on to say, because it was representative Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world, whose mediation in consequence of his sacrifice will endure so long as time lasts. It is remarkable that though the Jews have ceased from the whole of their sacrificial system, so that the sacrifices are no longer offered by them in any part of the country, yet they all, in all their generations and in all countries, including the United States, that's my parenthetical thing, they keep up the remembrance of the Passover and observe the feast of unleavened bread. But no lamb is sacrificed. Pay attention to that. No lamb is sacrificed. Their sacrifices have all totally ceased ever since the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans. Even the flesh that is used on this occasion is partly roasted and partly boiled, that it may not even resemble the primitive sacrifice. For they deem it unlawful to sacrifice outside of Jerusalem. But the truth is, the true Lamb of God that takes away the sin of the world has been offered, and they have no power to restore the ancient type. Now, this is what is the purpose of what's called the New Covenant. We no longer have to offer sacrifices anymore. Neither is there any more compunction or obligation or duty on our part to follow all of the feasts. There used to be that obligation because Christ had not appeared, had not been incarnated yet to save humanity from their sins. He did not appear to take sin upon himself. So up until that point in time, up until then, the people had to keep reliving, reenacting, so to speak, these memories of how God had delivered them. And not only that, in Old Testament times, as far as Passover is concerned, Passover was more than just a religious festival. It was a sacrifice for the entire nation of Israel. Which, by the way, let me insert this in here parenthetically, this is where the Roman Catholics get their doctrine for transubstantiation. It is the doctrine that Christ keeps dying over and over again at communion for the sins of the saints. And this is what they point to prove that Passover is a perpetual sacrifice. Okay? Now, I only said that to make my point that Passover was more than just a religious festival. It was a sacrifice. And as Adam Clark said, the Jews to this day do not offer the lamb sacrifice that was supposed to be offered at Passover.